Joseph was surprised to see gray streaks in the man's otherwise black beard. "Are you here to support your son?" Joseph asked. The gentleman turned, and Joseph was taken aback by the sadness he saw in the older man's eyes. "I'm here to volunteer," he said quietly. "Surely your family needs you, sir." The man stood quietly, and Joseph wondered if he had overstepped his bounds. "I mean no offense, sir," he apologized. "None taken," the stranger replied. "My son was killed during the Battle of Hoke's Run a year ago this month." He took off his hat and wiped his brow. "It broke my wife's heart. She died of fever of the lung this past Christmas." "I am truly sorry for your loss," Joseph said. He lowered his head and stared at his shoes. "I have made my peace with God." The man put his hat back on. "Do you think they will take me?" The question hung in the air between them. I do not know, sir." "I'm old, I know this. But I'm still strong, and a good shot with my rifle." Joseph bobbed his head. "Then I'm sure they will." He stuck out his hand. "My name is Joseph Hoover." The man took Joseph's hand warmly. "Jacob Gardner." The officer on the veranda cleared his throat again, and the two men fell silent. "This is the last day we will be in Little Falls," the officer surveyed the men standing before him. "I had hoped for a larger gathering of men," he sighed. "Perhaps more will come as the day moves on. All of you are here to answer your country's call," he went on. "We need good, strong young men to bring the southern states back into the Union and end this war." "When will it end?" All heads turned to the families who stood behind the men. One of the mothers had stepped forward, ignoring her husband's attempt to keep her still. "When will it end?" she asked again. There was no mistaking how poor this mother and father were. Both were dressed in clothes that had been mended almost to the point that there was more stitching than cloth. The officer shot the woman a glare. "Madam, I assure you that the war will end before Christmas. Even now our forces are harrying the enemy on several fronts. It is only a matter of time before they come to their senses and surrender." "That is what we were told when our oldest boy signed that piece of paper," she said, pointing an accusing finger at the stack of papers on the table. "He was blown up not more than a month ago." Tears began rolling down her face, leaving trails in the dust that covered her cheeks. "We had 2 sons. Now you take our last, and he's not more than a week past 18. Everyone turned to look for the younger son. He was not hard to spot. He stood with his head down, his cheeks red either from anger or embarrassment, perhaps both, Joseph thought. The officer cleared his throat again. "Perhaps, sir," he said, addressing the boy's father, "if you could control your wife, we can begin." The woman's husband wrapped his arms around his wife and whispered into her ear as he pulled her back. Joseph watched as the woman collapsed in tears, the husband finally forced to half carry, half drag her from the roadway. "Now," the officer continued, "if you gentlemen would be so good as to form a line at the foot of these steps, we can finish this before the heat becomes overpowering." Joseph moved with the other men and lined up. He and Jacob were the last in line, and it took almost an hour before Joseph reached the bottom of the steps. The sun was now overhead, the heat and dust becoming stifling. Sweat ran freely down Joseph's face, and his white shirt was drenched and clinging to him. He shuffled his feet uncomfortably as he waited for the man ahead of him to finish signing his name. "Next!" the sergeant bellowed. Joseph climbed the short steps and stood before the table. The sergeant shuffled some papers until he found one that was blank. He dipped the pen in the ink pot, giving the pen one sharp shake to make sure the ink didn't drip. "Name," he called out. "Family name first, Christian name second." Joseph's voice seemed to leave him just then, and he barely heard himself when he answered, "Hoover. Joseph." The sergeant leaned over the table. "You ashamed of your name, boy?" he growled. No, sir." Joseph shook his head. He heard some of the men standing in the street chuckling. "And why are you whispering it?" The sergeant squinted his eyes. "Say it loud and proud, son."